Let's think together for a moment about the clothes that you're wearing. Think about how your clothes say something about who you are, your gender, your age, your economic status, maybe even how you feel about yourself. And as you think about that, imagine yourself in quite different clothes. And note that your real self wouldn't change. Even if you are wearing clothes from a totally different culture, you would still be who you are. So, your real self is not your clothes. Therefore, you can conclude, I am not my clothes. Now think about the place where you live. Think about everything you own. Those things say a lot about you, but are you your possessions? Would you change even if a fire or a flood took everything you have away? So think about that and say to yourself, I am not my possessions. Think next about your job, whether you are working from home or at a different location, or you're a student or a retiree. A lot of our identity comes from our job, but if you did something quite different, would your essential self change? I mean, wouldn't you still be you? So think about this and say to yourself, I am not my job. Think about your relationships. Think about the people who think of you as a friend, or as a brother or sister, or as a cousin, or as a child, or a parent, or as a spouse. And imagine what it would be like if all those people disappeared from the earth. Would you stop being yourself? I mean, wouldn't your true self persist? Think about this and say, my relationships are a very important part of my life, but I am not my relationships. Now, how do you feel? Both your physical and emotional feelings. You may be in pain this moment. You may be grieving, or you may be feeling very peaceful and happy. Maybe you really don't like this exercise and you are irritated and angry, maybe even a little frightened. Imagine that somehow the feeling that you have at this moment was taken away and an opposite feeling was put into its place. Would you stop being you? Would your essential self really change all that much? Think about this and say, my feelings are very important, but I am not my feelings. And then pay attention to what you're thinking at this moment. Perhaps you're worried. You're making plans. Maybe you're thinking critically about yourself or about me or about other people that you know. Maybe you're thinking about the past or about the future. Obviously, our thoughts are very close to our essential selves, yet they're always changing. So there must be something about us that never changes because each of us is always the same person, no matter what we're thinking about. So think about this and say, I am not just my thoughts. Who am I? Who am I? And listen to the words of Jesus again. If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. The person you are before God is that mysterious I who isn't what you wear or what you do or what you feel or what you think or what you own. Wouldn't you like to find that person, that essential I? How do we find the true self, the self that we are before God, and discover the with God life of the kingdom of heaven? Well, Jesus tells us that the first step is to lose what we think we are or what we think we're supposed to be. And that loss is hard. When Jesus went to the cross, he lost everything. He lost his position in the community. Instead of a respected rabbi, he became a common criminal. He lost his friends and his followers. He lost his only possessions, his clothes, and with them went his dignity. He lost his family because in order to ensure his mother's survival, he actually gave her away to one of his disciples. And there was that terrible moment when he even, just for a moment, lost his connection with God when he cried, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Jesus lost everything, including life itself. But in losing everything, he became the person he really was before God, the Christ, the Son of God. And so we listen again to Jesus' words. "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me." So that little exercise that we went through at the beginning of the message, that was a denial of our outward selves. I deny that I am the clothes that I wear. I deny that I am the job that I perform every day. I deny that I am my relationships. I deny that I am my feelings. And of course, in some ways, that exercise is superficial. It's one thing to say to yourself, of course, I'm not my clothes. Of course, I'm not my possessions. It's another thing to go and sell all that you have and give it to the poor and follow Jesus. It's one thing to say, of course, I'm not my job. It's another thing to lose your job or quit your job or to retire from a job. It's one thing to say, I am not my relationships. It's another thing to lose your relationships or to have them change profoundly. This church is full of people who have suffered losses of possessions, of jobs, and of relationships. People here know that pain. People who have been through these traumas can tell you, however, that there is always something to be discovered when what you always identified as yourself is stripped away. That something is the self that God sees and God knows, or as Susan told our children, that God celebrates. This, however, happens involuntarily and usually painfully because Jesus counsels us to deliberately lose ourselves. Remember those words? If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. That sounds a little bit harsh, but friends, it's really a prescription for spiritual health. Letting go of the things that seem to define us gives us the chance to grow and change. And I can think of no better place to see the truth of this than that experience of a high school class reunion. The healthiest and most interesting and most authentic people at a class reunion are the people who let go of what they were when they were in high school. And the most tragic people are the ones who have hung on to the identity that they once had. The class clown, the jock, the class homecoming queen. Sooner or later, many of us come to the conclusion that we need to let go of pieces of our identity and try to find our real selves. And when we do that, we will run into difficulty because Satan will stand in our way. And when I speak of Satan here, I am not talking about Satan as the epitome of evil. I'm speaking of Satan in the same way Jesus was in our gospel lesson. You see, when Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan," he isn't saying that Peter is the prince of darkness. In fact, if it weren't for John Milton and Dante and possibly the book of Revelation, we wouldn't even think of Satan as the prince of darkness, because Satan throughout the Bible is just the one who keeps getting in people's way, or the one whom God uses to test people's faithfulness to God. Now, you and I both know that when we're really honest with ourselves, that most people's real problem in life, our own real problem in life, is that we get in our own way. We're not as loving and as free as we are created to be because we keep getting in our own way. In his last earthly appearance with Peter, for instance, which if you're doing our Read Through the Bible program, we read this a couple of weeks ago, Jesus asked him, "Do you love me more than these?" Those things that get in the way. Walter Wink, a biblical scholar, has said that Satan is yesterday's will of God. When we do the will of God, you see, we feel alive. We feel like we're doing the right thing, that our lives have meaning and purpose. However, the thing that made us feel alive and which was right for yesterday might not be right for today. It may have simply lost its meaning and purpose. Remember the class reunion? It isn't just our possessions, our careers, and our relational roles that get in our way. Our beliefs can also get in our way. We can understand that losing or changing our possessions, our job, our relational roles might help us find our true self, but what about our beliefs? I mean, aren't my beliefs, especially my religious beliefs about God and Jesus Christ, always true and always God's will? Aren't my religious beliefs fundamental to who I am? In a word, no. Our beliefs actually belong to yesterday. Indeed, our beliefs might simply be inherited, even the ones that seem to define who we are. And they may have been right and true and meaningful for our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, but they might get in our way. They may stop us from having an authentic faith in Christ. And that's exactly what happens to Peter in this passage. Only minutes after he affirms that Jesus is the Messiah, and Jesus commends him and calls him a rock and tells him that he is the foundation of the church, Jesus starts talking about having to die. Now, this isn't Peter's understanding of what the Messiah is. Peter, you see, had the Sunday school picture of the Messiah in his head. It was a picture of a king who sat on a throne and ruled forever, a king who would never die. Peter had inherited his belief from his ancestors. He had made it his own, especially as a follower of Jesus, whom he believed to be the Messiah. And so he starts to argue with Jesus. "You can't die," said Peter. "That's not what the Messiah does. The Messiah lives forever." Peter's most sacred beliefs were getting in the way of his really hearing Jesus and seeing Jesus and understanding Jesus and following Jesus. They were getting in the way of Peter becoming Peter, Peter the disciple, Peter the follower of Jesus, Peter the rock upon whom the church would have its foundation. So when Jesus says that his followers must be willing to pick up their crosses to follow him and lose their lives in order to find them again, he means that sometimes we even have to lose our beliefs, our faith, so that we can find a truer and deeper faith. Jesus never changes, but we change in our understanding of him. To take up our cross means that we're willing to let go of everything that was true of us yesterday and to let God show us who we are today. We need to die to yesterday in order to be raised up today. In fact, the strange thing that we discover is that the more we let go of yesterday and of who we think we are and what we think we want, the more we find that there really is a self down there inside each of us, a self that has been there from the time we were babies and will be there until we die. So claim that self that Christ calls to follow him over the horizon into a new world he has claimed as the kingdom of heaven. Claim that with God life that allows each of us to experience the kingdom on earth just as it is in heaven. And together we will see where God takes us. Amen.